Welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm Kathleen Walter. Federal authorities are investigating whether suspicious packages discovered on planes bound for the U.S. were part of a terrorist plot or a dry run for an attack. Those packages originated in Yemen. Watching this very closely for us is terrorism analyst and Newsmax contributor Dr. Walid Phares. He joins us now via the phone from Washington. Dr. Phares, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Dr. Phares, one U.S. official has said authorities are investigating whether the incident was a dry run for a plot to send bombs through the mail delivery system. In your view, is this indeed a dry run for a terror attack?
Well, the first reaction of government and of security officials would be to see that the goal of this operation was not actually to send real bombs, and that's why their conclusion is maybe this is a dry run. I would add to it. I would say that, first of all, we haven't seen the end of the day, the end of the week. We have seen attempts before that. Over the past few days, there were attempts against national security, and we have been listening to calls by Al-Qaida officials for attacks against U.S. and European targets. So we have to put it in perspective. Whatever the case is, if this is a dry run, it basically has caused whatever Al-Qaida wanted, that is to mobilize our resources, them being in the news, and of course bleeding us economically, even for one day or more. So whatever is the answer, I would think that this is part of a much wider effort that they are deploying specifically in this time of the year.
Dr. Phares, you talked about this time of the year. Let's look at the timing. Less than a week before the midterm elections. Could this have been a possible plot to disrupt U.S. elections or even disrupt them indirectly?
Well, when Al-Qaida plans, it has multiple components. We've seen it before, and we've seen it in other countries. They look at the political process, they look at the economic process, and certainly, and there is no doubt about it, they've done it before in national and local elections around the world and in America. The midterm elections are important for them because they want to send a strong message that would impact the vote, that would impact Americans in any way, shape, or form. But there are also other issues. The fact that Al-Qaida now is putting pressure on the United States to quickly complete its withdrawal from Iraq, including the remaining forces, to begin the engagement with the Taliban and withdraw its forces, to intimidate U.S. policy in Yemen and Somalia, and more importantly, to intimidate Americans here at home. So obviously, there is this political goal by Al-Qaida to impact our political process, but also obviously it is to show other jihadists around the world that our system is weak, that they can penetrate that system even without the use of bomb. They have already instilled fear in the hearts of many Americans.
Now, there are reports that at least 2 packages were addressed to a synagogue and a Jewish community center in Chicago. Other packages were sent to Great Britain and also Dubai. What kind of message is being sent here?
Al-Qaeda's complex operations, as I call them, have always a main goal and then multiple other goals. To send packages to religious sites, specifically synagogues and Jewish temples, is to show their own constituencies that they can hit at, Jewish targets and goals around the world that would put Al-Qaeda in the framework of a, anti-Zionist, quote unquote, or anti-Jewish organization leading that effort. But at the same time, sending other packages to other locations means that Al-Qaeda is showing that it can thrust through any security system, both in the region, in the Arabian Peninsula, and internationally. But as I said earlier, it is too early to assess this specific operation because it's not a one single operation. We have been seeing before shots at the Pentagon, Quantico. We've seen the U.S. government arresting a number of individuals who were planning on attacking military sites. So only time will tell us over the next few days and weeks what is the real meaning of this operation.
Dr. Phares, are we seeing a renaissance, if you will, by Al-Qaeda despite the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan? And does Al-Qaeda remain as much of a threat to the U.S. as before our attempts to address the threat?
Well, in the middle of a war, these forces are evolving unless we have an absolute control over our policy towards the jihadist ideology, towards the recruitment, towards radicalization. As long as we don't have enough allies in the Arab and Muslim world to engage in this de-radicalization effort, one has to project there will be more recruits to Al-Qaida. And more recruits to Al-Qaida means more fuel to their operations. Those who are perpetrating these attempts or previous successful and bloody attempts around the world, including in America, over the past year, are basically new recruits for Al-Qaida. So yes, Al-Qaida continues to be a major threat to the United States and to our allies just because their instrument, their structure to recruit and mobilize is still working. And to stop it, we really need to have a major change of policy in Washington and address the root causes of radicalization, what really creates those jihadists. And unfortunately, over the past 2 years, we've just done the opposite. We said we're not going to be looking at the ideology. We're not going to be looking at these important concepts and words of jihad and jihadism. We're going to look only at the police aspect of it. Well, that is 50% only of the war against Al-Qaida. Hence, I would say that bases from Yemen, bases from Somalia, and including the classical bases from Waziristan, Pakistan, Afghanistan, are going to continue to recruit. And continuing to recruit means that there will be always attempts to attack against the United States and our allies.
Dr. Phares, are you then saying that the Obama administration's approach is inadequate? And in your opinion, are we safer now under President Obama than under President Bush or vice versa?
Well, the last part of the question, I'll leave it to the voters, I'll leave it to the policymakers, I'll leave it to the lawmakers, opinion makers. What I can do as someone who is following on the growth of the jihadist movement, including Al-Qaida, but not just Al-Qaida, there are other jihadist movements in the world. Well, certainly the fact that we are sending a signal that we are disengaging from the confrontation with their ideology. We are disengaging from supporting the anti-jihadist forces in the Middle East. We had a democratic uprising in Iran last year that we did not help. We have now in Lebanon a situation where Hezbollah is on the rise. We are talking about engaging politically with the Taliban. Well, all these messages at the end of the day are going to encourage the other side to move forward. So truly, I believe that the next Congress should basically engage in dialogue with the President and his administration and convince them that they should change the direction for the remaining 2 years of the mandate.
Once again, U.S. officials are looking into whether Al-Qaida in Yemen has anything to do with it. What steps is the U.S. taking to minimize the threat there? And do you foresee strikes against terrorist groups in Yemen by the U.S. anytime soon or in the near future?
Well, anytime the U.S. military and the intelligence community will find that there is a group or an organization anywhere on the planet which is planning on direct attacks against our homeland and to breach our national security, there will be responses, and there will be preemptive responses if needed. So if Al-Qaida in Yemen is attempting to attack us, I do project that the U.S. withdrawn, the weapons and other ways will strike. But the long-term solution is to enable the Yemeni government and the Yemeni political process to combat radicalization long-term. And that, I haven't seen yet a vivid, strong U.S. policy with regard to de-radicalization. This is where we should be putting our efforts in the next few years. All
right, Newsmax contributor Dr. Walid Phares, thanks so much for joining us. As always, we appreciate your knowledge and insight.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.